Good morning, and many thanks for inviting me to share with you some of the insights and experiences we have had with running a randomized drug trial in pregnancy during the COVID-19 pandemic. I am principal investigator on the Ireland study, which is investigating the role of early low dose in aspirin in diabetes pregnancy. This trial is being run through the HRB funded Mother and Baby Clinical Trials Network, and focuses on a very specific cohort of high risk pregnant women who have pre-existing type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So these are all of our partners participating in this study across 7 clinical and academic sites across the island of Ireland. Now, just by way of operational context, just very briefly to give a sense of the lead-in to 2020, we ran a pilot for this study between 2015 and 2016, and the DFA grant was awarded for the definitive study in March of 2017. We ran into an issue with sponsorship, which was resolved ultimately with the Rotunda Hospital acting as sponsor for this trial and delegating sponsorship duties to RCSI. But all of that delayed us a little bit and required a lot of back and forth with State Claims Agency. Ultimately, the clinical trial agreements were signed at all 7 sites, but with a variable amount of time required for each site, and 8 months, in fact, in the case of Cork. So that ultimately, in December 2019, so just over a year ago, and 27 months after the grant agreement was signed with HRB, we recruited our first patient for this trial. Our target is 360 over a 36-month period. The 6th site, which is Cork, is a sizable site, just became active last month, and the final site, Limerick, is due to be green-lighted this week. So to date, we've recruited 56 patients over the first year of the study. And so we're certainly on our way, but it has been a long, hard road, and one that nonetheless is worthwhile. Now, COVID-19 could not have come, I suppose, at a worse time. Is 3 months into our initial recruitment, and what I would have to say is that just where I work with some wonderful co-PIs across the country, we all have the same challenges effectively. We all have very full-on clinical commitments, and those have obviously been made more challenging this year, and that's a common theme across all hospitals. What was most striking to begin with is the overarching dominance of COVID-19 in the hospital setting. It effectively dominates almost all clinical decision making, and a lot of what happened at the beginning was very reactionary. So, for instance, an edict that no non-COVID research was to proceed, and that research staff were all to be seconded to contact tracing and other COVID-related duties in the hospital, and all of that really settled down. And certainly, I would say that from our own perspective, working in a standalone maternity hospital, it did become pretty evident reasonably early on that we in obstetrics do not have a starring role in this pandemic, and that's not intended to be self-deprecating in any way. You know, everything has been very challenging for us really from an organizational perspective, caring for over 8,000 pregnant women in the interval since March 2020, and doing so safely in a way that protects staff, but also being very mindful of the very justified anxieties that we've been dealing with in our pregnant population. All of that has been really challenging, but it has been very reassuring for us to see that COVID-19 has not caused, thankfully, any undue morbidity in our population. The number of cases of COVID-19 that we've had have been small. They've all been community cases that have recovered. In that large patient population, we have actually only had 2 patients hospitalized with COVID, and that's intended to say hospitalized for COVID treatment, and not incidental COVID infection, hospitalized for the purposes of delivering a baby. And so we were able to, from a research perspective, we were able to step back and look at COVID-19 in context, and rather than taking the often sort of default position of, well, we cannot do anything non-COVID related, is to ask, well, what can we continue to do? And we've taken a very positive approach throughout. I think we don't really have a choice, and that has worked well for us. And it has been our experience with all of those with whom I collaborate and work across all of the network sites, is that we effectively have taken the same positive, proactive approach to proceeding with a trial that we have fought very hard for, and have felt very strongly about for a long period of time. So we have observed a disconnect somewhat between the universities and the hospitals, in that the universities have instructed, so all of our, certainly the majority of our research staff are university employees. The universities have instructed them to work from home, certainly during level 5, and unless it's not possible to do so. And we have managed to get the majority of our research assistants back into the hospital with appropriate safety training and an appropriate risk assessment done and conducted by our sponsorship office. Our network colleagues in National Maternity put together a very nice online training module related to COVID-19 precautions and appropriate measures that can be adopted by research staff in attending clinics for the purposes of recruiting patients, and that's worked really well. Introductory telephone consultations have been really important to us, because one of the biggest constraints that we have is in not being able to conduct any face-to-face patient contact that lasts for more than 15 minutes. And that's very challenging in recruiting a patient properly to a clinical trial. And so we developed recruitment videos, videos accessible to patients via YouTube or to prospective trial recruits via YouTube. They get an introductory telephone consultation from either the sub-investigator or research assistant with us, who makes an introductory call to the patient, has a chat with them about what's involved in the trial. And all of that chatting can happen in advance of the patient's official screening visit at the hospital, so that's been really important for us and has worked really well. And in a way that, COVID or no COVID, we would continue with that practice, because it actually is from the patient's perspective, allows them to digest information much more readily, and they don't feel like they're being put on the spot. We would certainly continue with that strategy, even if COVID were to disappear tomorrow. One of the problems we've had are the patients that we are approaching have type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And this is arguably one of our highest risk obstetric populations. They don't tend to have 4 or 5 babies. They have 1 or 2. These pregnancies are all marathons, okay? And we certainly observed that those pregnancies kind of almost disappeared for the first few months of the pandemic, and we recognized pretty quickly that patients were deferring pregnancy because they perceived some uncertainty in relation to how COVID-19 might impact pregnancy ambitions or pregnancy health. And that was probably, you know, a lot of patients got spooked by seeing fertility clinics shutting down at the very beginning, under instruction from the fertility societies internationally, who said, well, you know, we don't know what effect COVID-19 has on pregnancy. Now that has all settled down. The data on pregnancy outcome is very reassuring. And so in recognition of the fact that COVID-19 is not going to disappear overnight, and that fertility prospects are finite for anybody, we're seeing certainly in the latter half of 2020, then we saw a resurgence in these pregnancies just emerging. So we kind of felt that we had a population of potential recruits available to us in recent months that just didn't seem to be there at the beginning. So that really is just something that took time and that we couldn't do anything about. Really important from a risk minimization point of view is that is the avoidance of research-only hospital visits. And thankfully, our trial did not require for patients to attend the hospital for dedicated research visits, and those research assessments that were required, we were very careful to ensure that they didn't unduly prolong any patient consultation in a way that would expose staff or patient to infection risk. We did actually on 2 occasions rationalize down the assessments that needed to be done in a way that actually was very logical, and that obviously had to go back to H4PRA and ethics. And it was a case of just looking at, well, you know, do all of these blood pressure assessments actually need to be done? Well, under 20 weeks preeclampsia doesn't exist, and therefore it was overkill for us to have included those assessments in the first place. So just that exercise, I think, was that, you know, the discipline of repeatedly looking at our study assessments and ensuring that all of those that we had included in the schedule of assessments really needed to be done. That has been very worthwhile. Similarly, rationalizing pharmacy visits, so from 3 down to 1 dispensing visit, that has worked very well actually for us. And probably then the only final thing to say in relation to a challenge that we haven't yet resolved is monitoring. So really important for the integrity of this trial is that monitoring remains robust. And again, so the monitors are not HSE employees. They do have a memo of understanding that allows university employees to access patient records on site, but not remotely. And I think that's probably appropriate. I would not be comfortable with non-HSE employees accessing patient records remotely, although 3 of our 7 sites do have an electronic healthcare record. So and the Rotunda would be one such site. We have an office space, a single office space available for the monitor, but it hasn't been possible for us to, during level 5 restrictions, although that monitor is allowed to attend, the university will not permit her to do so. So the monitoring that's happening just at the moment is happening virtually, but without the ability to do source data verification, and that has been deferred a little bit, and that's a bit of a challenge for us and something that we need to watch just very closely. Hopefully in the coming weeks we'll be able to revert back to allowing source data verification to happen on site with that monitor. So that is all I have for you. I'll finish with a photo of us being vaccinated, which might have been the most exciting time of the last few months. And we look forward to brighter months ahead. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to field any questions that you might have.